All right, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Leaderboard, episode 3. The title of this episode is going to be Your Past Doesn't Equal Your Future. Um, where I really want to go with this is just, I think a lot of people get too caught up on things that have happened in the past that didn't go right for them. And what's happening is people spend way too much time asking themselves, what if this doesn't work? And what they should be asking themselves is, what if it does? I've seen a lot of people decide that they didn't want to do this anymore, that family first life wasn't for them just because they had some temporary setbacks. And the attitude that I think is most important for people to grab hold of is the idea that things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Like when I think back, one of the worst days of my life. So I always tell this story at the BDMs that everybody laughs at this, but the last sales job I had, I actually got fired from it. And not only did I get fired from it, but they threw all my stuff out in the street. And I actually got in a fist fight with 2 people. And I make the joke that I would have won, but the one lady was like 67 years old. And that's actually a true story. Now, I didn't hit an old lady or nothing. But that was a really bad day. Like that actually really happened. And I remember basically driving across town. I worked 45 minutes away from home. So by where I lived was the competitor. So I was commuting 45 minutes to work at this one place, and their number one competitor in Southern California was literally less than a mile from my house. And I'd never considered working there because I'd heard all kinds of bad stuff. Might be a big part of, like, a lot of people just they hear bad stuff about FFL because the old IMO where they're at, they want to keep them there, so they tell them a bunch of lies, right? So that's kind of what had happened in this situation. So a mile away from my house, I'm totally freaked out. I have blood on me because I got in a fist fight with 2 people. One was the 67-year-old lady, but the other guy actually fought back in that situation. And so I'm totally scared. I'm crying. I was making a really good living doing what I was doing. I was selling water softeners. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I just lost my job. I don't know how I'm pay my bills. I was making a good living, but I was spending all the money. Like, what am I going to do? And I turned to go home down the one street, and I look over to the left, and here's the competitor. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to pull in there and see if I can get a job. So I pull into this place. I walk in. I have the name of the company on my shirt, so they know where I came from. It has blood on it. This whole thing's happening. And I explained what happened, and I said, hey, I got fired from there, but I really feel like I'm a good worker. You guys should give me a shot. So they're kind of laughing at me, and they send me into the manager. His name was Leonard, and Leonard decided to give me a job. Now, at that job, it was commission only. Where I was before, I got a salary plus commission. So I had this really cush deal, and I'm thinking, man, I don't know if I can do it on commission only. And I started this sales job commission only. And I mean, they'd hire anybody who wanted to work there. I mean, most people came in the door probably had blood on their shirt, to be honest with you. But I was super grateful to have that opportunity. And when I look back over the course of that happened in 2002. So when I look back over the course of the last 19 years, that was one of the most pivotal moments of my entire life. And for a day, it felt like that the world was ending. Like, what I discovered is that some of God's greatest gifts come in ugly wrapping paper. They come disguised as problems. And a lot of times the struggles you're going through, it's not happening to you, it's happening for your benefit. The problem isn't for you, it's actually for the people that are watching you. You say, why does this stuff keep happening to me? It's for the people that are looking and watching to see how you're going to react. Like, you're inspiring somebody else. To piggyback on that story, what ended up happening there was the assistant manager set me up on a blind date with Jure. Had I not gotten in that fist fight, I'd have never met Jure. If I'd have never met Jure, I probably never would have gotten married. And that's actually the truth. I would have re-enlisted in the Marine Corps. I was in the reserve still. And my time to re-enlist was up. Jure was a little bit older than me. And she told me, hey, if you re-enlist, I'm not going to wait for you. And I was like, okay, I'm not re-enlisting then. If they need me, they'll call me back. And they didn't call me back. But had I re-enlisted, there'd be no Dre, there'd be no Emery, there'd be no Harper. I wouldn't be here. I met one of my best friends of my adult life a few weeks after I started at that company, who's Jacob Meffert. Jacob Meffert started me down a path in life that literally I wouldn't have found my way to Family First Life were it not for Jacob. There are so many things looking back that you can piece together. And hindsight is an interesting thing, because when you look back, you say, oh man, look at this chain of events that led me to this place. And the idea is it didn't happen to you, it happened for you. All these little mistakes and blunders and screw ups along the way literally prepared me for the greatest opportunity of my life. And I know that so many of you can relate to what I'm saying. You're in the exact same place. You have all these different experiences and all these different challenges and problems along the way that have literally uniquely prepared you for right where you're at. And we all have situations like that. What's interesting is the other part that I want to share with people is that it's not really about you, it's about who's watching you. Talking to Patrice Thompson, who will hit Hall of Fame in 2021, for sure. She's going to hit Hall of Fame. Patrice has been in the insurance profession for a really long time. In fact, my first go at the insurance profession was at a previous company. And the first meeting that I went to was an absolute disaster. And I completely disliked every person there, except for one person, and that was Patrice. And the only reason why I ever went back, like Patrice did this podcast, we talked about it last week. Patrice did this podcast, and I don't know, she's hired a bunch of people from this podcast. But if it were not for Patrice's personality and her ability to connect with people, I would have never went back to that second meeting. I only went back because Patrice was there. And that's actually the truth. Now, I don't know if she's the only reason why I went back to the third one, but the third one is when I met Andrew Taylor, and that happened to be his last meeting, which is really interesting. So everything happens for a reason. And I think when I talked to Patrice about some of the things that changed for her, that caused her to go from not being really productive, going through ups and downs of selling, to finally flipping the switch where she's going to hit Hall of Fame in 2021, it came from a conversation that she had with Sean when she realized that her kids were watching. See, a lot of the struggles you go through, we think so short term about it. Like, what's the lesson in this for me? What's the lesson in this for me? What is God trying to tell me in this moment? And I promise you that more often than not, the lesson actually isn't for you. It's for the people watching you. So when Patrice figured out that it was her kids were watching, it changed everything. See, that happened for me as well. I remember a time when I had this conversation with Sean Mike, and I was in this depression because I had this baggage and this weight of like financial ruin in my wake, like behind me, of things that I'd screwed up. And I was carrying around this guilt. And we had this conference call because Andrew's always done a Saturday call with Sean. But the way the call used to work was they would basically get an agent on this call, and Sean would basically just kind of counsel the agent one-on-one, but they'd record it and let everybody listen to it. So it was super, it was super intimate, but it was also very public because people would listen. And this one conversation that we had is I'd had this house that was repossessed. It was foreclosed on. And I had so much guilt over it because it was my wife bought that house, and then we got married. I kind of messed her up financially. It was my fault. And we ended up losing that house. And that was the house that we brought both of our kids home to. And sentimentally, I was so attached to that. And I had shared that. And then Sean broke it down and said, listen, he goes, a lot of people think that the big motivation here is money. He goes, I'm not motivated about money. I could care less. He goes, what motivates me is my family. And that's what motivates you too. You want to do this for your family. And the truth is, when I really thought about what he said, he was right. And nobody'd ever, and that sounds so simple. Gosh, that sounds so simple. But I was spending so much time trying to do this for everybody else's goals and all the different things that I'd tried in my life that I wasn't successful at financially. I was always doing it for other people's goals. And I always thought it was for this ultimate reality of getting a certain thing or being in a certain place, or, you know, whatever it was. It was always somebody else's idea of what success was. And Sean basically gave me permission to say, you know what? It's okay to just do this for your family, to make sure that your kids don't want to go without. Like, that's okay. You don't have to want to travel the world. You don't have to want to have the most expensive car. You don't have to flash wealth. You don't have to do any of that stuff. But you can work really hard for your family. And it's not about so much what the money can do for your family. It's what your family, seeing how hard you work and what you'll go through for them, will do for your family. And I thought about that a lot. And that was a driving force, literally the first whole year after that, because I thought about my own family and how, when I was growing up, how hard my parents worked and what an impact that had on me. And it wasn't about what we had or what we got. It was the fact that they were sacrificing, and I could see it. And so that's when I started paying attention to some of the time when you run into obstacles and you run into problems and things. It's not really meant for you. It's meant for the people that are watching. It's like when my mom was diagnosed with cancer. She was a beast. I mean, she was something else. She never even acted like it bothered her at all, because I was watching. She was showing me what it was supposed to look like to be in the fight of your life. And so when I reflect and I think back over major challenges, things that I think are major challenges, nothing really compares to what she went through and how she handled it. So my mom went to 3 years of chemotherapy. She never even threw up once. Now, that's crazy. And she was so freaking stubborn that after chemo, this is what she wanted to go do. She wanted to go get an Ortega cheese chili cheeseburger with extra peppers, a milk, and orange juice, and a Coke. Now, if I ate that right now, I'd throw up. It's not even with any kind of heavy metals being injected into my blood. But she was just so stubborn to prove that it wasn't going to get her down no matter what. And she showed me what it was like to have to fight for something. And she literally did that just because I was watching. And so that's what I want you to realize. When you're running through struggles in this business, it's not always meant for you. It's meant for somebody watching. And it's not about what happens to you. It actually happened for you. A lot of the things you think are going to help you for gain, you know, those unanswered prayers. That's like that old song, you know, sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers. That is so true. A lot of the things that you're dealing with now are just so that you can mentor and help other people who are going through the same thing later. So be grateful for the problems. Be grateful for the challenges. Be grateful for the story. And I think that that's something that the people that have done so well, because we were going through the numbers, and the numbers are crazy. Family First Life, the entire West Coast hierarchy is insane. I think there's 73 logos. I was just listening to Grady read a list of stuff, and it's like in the West Coast agency in the month of February, 73 people earned a logo. That's insane. FFL USA alone has 10 board members. I remember when Family First Life didn't have 10 board members. I remember they didn't have 2. I mean, it's fascinating to see the progression and how this thing is unfolded over time. And I think the thing that people neglect to understand is it's really always been broken down to just success can be found in your daily agenda. Like, it's so easy to fall into this idea of, you know, instant success or the highlight reel. And you're looking at everybody's Instagram and you're like, oh goodness, look at how awesome this thing is. But you don't see the countless hours of struggle and toil and disappointment and closet crying moments and all the things that you go through on the way. And what I want you to get used to is just enjoying being on the way. The reality is, like, none of us are getting any younger. This is what had to happen for me. There was a turning point in my life, in Family First Life. Something changed when I got here. Because I've always used the same skill set. I didn't have to learn a new skill set in my adult working life than the one I had when I actually arrived at Family First. But what changed was my mentality. My mentality changed so much because I stopped looking to the left and looking to the right and trying to find an easier way. And I understood that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, exactly when I'm supposed to be there. And I'm just going to go to work every day with faith, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. And ultimately, the success is not going to be up to me. It's not. I'm going to work really hard every single day. I'm going to try to enjoy the work that I'm doing. I'm going to do it with a higher sense of purpose and a higher sense of a higher ideal of what the outcome is. I'm going to try not to focus so much on myself and focus on other people. And I'm going to truly try to just exemplify what it is that I want to have out of my life and pour it all into this. I want to give more than I've ever given. I want to help more than I've ever helped. I want to think more about others than I ever have before. I want to put it all on the line. And I don't want to be in a situation again where I have to start over. And so what I'm going to do different is, no matter what, I'm not going to let my emotions get the best of me and run me out based over something temporary. You know, I talk about that fist fight that I had at the old job, right? And even though I didn't start that, I was attacked by two people, actually. But I think about the stuff that led up to that emotionally and all the drama that surrounded that situation and how absolutely stupid that was and how that could have all been completely avoided. And it was a great lesson where I look back and I think, man, some things that you think are so important right now, if you just let time heal, you don't have to be caught up in all this conflict and all this drama all the time. And the saving grace, too, in this business, which is really interesting, is like the foundational belief you have to have is, regardless of what's going on the outside, the next client that you go see, like, they don't have any idea about any of that stuff. They just want help with insurance. So once I learned the skill of, regardless of what's going on in my personal life, regardless of what's going on the outside, once I close that car door, my problems stay there and I just go help these people with the life insurance they asked for help with. And then when I get back in my car, all my problems will still be there and I can start thinking about them again and getting caught up in all that stuff, whatever. But the reality was, the next client that I went to go see, they didn't know any of that. They just wanted to make sure that their kids didn't have to have a car wash if they died. And it was so freeing because I realized that what we do, it serves a greater purpose than just, temporary solving of income problems. I think one of the things that makes a major change in your life in this business is when you get a death claim, and it's usually the person you thought it wouldn't be. It's really a trip, actually. That's one of the questions I ask people a lot is, hey, have you ever had a death claim? When they've been an agent for a while. And it's fascinating because I know a lot of agents that have just been doing it for a few months. They already have their first death claim, and it's not the person you thought it was going to be. The person that you thought was as sick could be, you're like, man, I don't know. Mary's got a lot of problems. Shoot, Mary, 8 years later, Mary's still going. But it's that guy that you show up and he really didn't want to meet you and you got to talk your way in the door and he's rushing you around and he doesn't really know if he needs it and he might want to talk to his son. And then, you level with him and you say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put the application in. And then he kind of takes a liking to you, and then he gives you some waffles. He's really not in that big of a rush. His name's Angelo. And then 3 weeks later, Angelo dies of a stroke. Like, and the death claim gets paid. And then you realize, and while you're there, you're like, you know what? I met Angelo's grandson, and he set him down. And he started telling him some stories about when he was younger, because he was trying to relate to him about something he was going through with this girl. And I'm remembering this whole story. And that was one I never thought would happen. So everything happens for a reason. Your steps really are guided. I believe that with everything in me. And it's no different here, you know? And I feel like if people could just get their mind off of, you know, what's going wrong and just start talking about what's going right. Like, I had this conversation with this agent yesterday. And the conversation was, well, I bought these 100 leads, and, you know, I talked to all these people, and some of the people said I was like the 5th person that called. And some of the people said, hey, you know, I'm really not interested anymore. And you know, I wasn't even, I don't even know why I did that. And he starts recounting to me all these conversations of where it went wrong. And I'm like, dude, why are you so hung up on everything that went wrong? How many did you book? He's like, I booked 4, but I bought 100. I go, yeah, but you didn't call them enough. Why don't you just keep going till you book 20? Like, you got to understand, the ones that say no, those aren't the ones you're supposed to be meeting with anyway. That's just part of your marketing system. Like, Dominique Rogers set me straight a long time ago with this. And I remember watching him dial. I walked into his office in Carlsbad, and on his desk, I mean, he just had like piles of leads. It looked like a tornado, so many leads, you know, and he booked like 16 appointments, and he was pretty much done, you know, for his first 2 days that he was going to run. Or he may not have even been setting for himself at that point. He might have been actually setting appointments for someone else. And because he actually did that for a while too. And because he was always on the phone. That's how Dominique got so good at dialing. He just dialed all the time. It didn't matter who it was for. And so he says to me, he goes, you see this pile right here? I'm like, yeah. He's like, those people told me no. I'm like, great. He goes, you want to know what I think about that? I'm like, what? He goes, I don't care. That's just part of my marketing program. Those are the ones that say no. I'm only looking for these ones. He had this other pile of appointments, right? That's the way to look at it. We're not trying to set appointments with the ones that said no. We're not caught up on what's not going right. We're not caught up on what's going wrong. We're caught up on what's actually going correct. And so this is a series of ups and downs in this business. And the goal is to always be getting better with the ups so the downs don't last as long. And I think people miss that because we're so good at recognition, and we're so good at promoting, and we're so good at getting people to see the success that everybody has, is that sometimes we forget that even the best producers there are will go through these times where they don't sell anything. Even the best producers there are have doubts. That doesn't mean you should go around and tell everybody your doubts. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying everybody goes through that. And if you can just remember that nobody's really any different than you. Everybody has the same challenges. Everybody had to figure it out. Everybody had to learn from their mistakes along the way. And nobody's perfect. Not everybody sells everything to everyone. And if you can just keep that mentality and focus on the work, get your thoughts on other people, not just you. Get your thoughts on other people's success, not just you. One of the best things you can do is hire other people. People say, yeah, I know. I want to build the business. I get it. No, you don't understand. Like, one of the best things you can do for you, for your own mentality, is to hire other people, because it gives you a greater sense of responsibility. And it also allows you to stop thinking about all the stuff that's going on with you. Like, one of the most motivating factors in this business for me from the very beginning, because I hired someone when I first started. And one of the most motivating factors in the very beginning was focusing on that person's goals, where he wanted to be, because that would get me up early and put me to bed late. And I don't know if you guys can, I think everybody can relate to that in a sense. And I want you to start finding out what people on your team, what their goals actually are. Why are they actually doing this? And if they don't do this, what are they going to do? If not this, what? That's a good question to ask yourself. If I didn't do this, what would I do? I think too many people, when they first are presented with the opportunity of Family First Life, the first thing you think is it's too good to be true, right? They can't be making all that money. The next thing people think is, yeah, everybody must have a lot of chargebacks. Like, I'm just telling you what I went through. Like, that's what I thought. I thought, oh yeah, they're selling all that, but how much of that really sticks, you know? And then you go through, well, you know, but if I generated my own leads, well, if I did that, you know, then I wouldn't have a lead expense. If I didn't have a lead expense, I'd be more. And you go through all these phases of not trusting it. And after all that's gone, and you look back and you realize, wow, I really should have just trusted this process from the beginning, you know, and it happens to everybody, by the way. And there comes a very distinct point in this business where you get the monkey off your back. That's what Andrew Taylor always called it. He said, there comes a point where you get the monkey off your back in this business. And here's what that is. That's the point where you realize that the only thing you actually need is just more leads to call, and you'll sell them. And you can write your own check. You can write your way out of any problem in the business. You're not going to get any weird objections that you don't know how to overcome on the phone. You're not going to get to the house and not know what to write. You're not going to have any weird objection or weird scenario happen in the house. You know that if you do X amount of activity, that it's going to equal X amount of results, and you can set a clock to it. And it becomes the most predictable, freeing thing in the world. That's what we call passing the monkey. Once you've done that, you got the monkey off your back, then this becomes the most refreshing, enlightened, simple thing that you've ever done. But there's this process that you have to go through to get to that. And it's interesting because I've been here a while, and I've watched that happen. I watched that happen with Jack Yu. I watched Jack Yu go through that process where he was struggling. He was writing premium. He wasn't really getting where he wanted to go. And then all of a sudden it was like this switch flipped. And the next day he was different. And then he could just write his own check. And it was just Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame. And then he started recruiting. And then he became attractive to people, and people wanted to work with him. And this whole process like became almost supernatural. But what happened was, for a distinct period of time, it was a true struggle. And he figured it out. Well, that happens with everybody. Now, some people figure it out fast, some people figure it out slow. But if you keep your head down, you stay focused on what's in front of you, you do the best with what you have, and you stop comparing yourself to everybody else. I mean, it's fascinating to me. I have seen people literally, even when they feel like they're failing miserably, they're still doing better financially than anything else they've ever done. But because so-and-so is doing so much better than them, they can't handle it and they give up. Doesn't that sound stupid? That just sounds so stupid when I say that. But I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. People do that. So my advice to you is, you know, don't do that. The other thing that I think is really important that people, when we talk about is the things that you encounter really isn't meant for you. It's meant for the people that are watching. It makes you super attractive as a recruiter, because a lot of the things that you think are really attractive to the people watching aren't really what it is. Like, you think it's like, hey, I'm going to show so-and-so my deposits. When I'm making $45,000 a month, then they'll see. Then they'll join my team. Let me tell you what, the ones that you actually want to hire are the ones that are watching you struggle with a good attitude, that are respecting you when they didn't respect you before. And when you're only going out and maybe you're issuing $4,000 in a week and you bring home $2,200 that week, you think that's not attractive because you think they see, you know, hundreds of other people in Family First Life killing it, you know, making $50,000 a week or whatever. But what you don't realize is they know you, and they know how big of a deal that $2,200 is. And to them, that's really attractive. See, not everybody is wooed by the title, or I'll give you an example. Like, there was this one meeting that we had, and we were all driving home in the same car. It was me, Andrew, Paul, and this new guy. And Paul and Andrew were killing it. They were doing really well financially. They'd gotten these big titles, and I don't even know what title it was back at that time. It was, I don't know if it was board member or even if we called it that. I can't even remember at this point. I think all we went to was VP, but they were doing really well financially. And this new recruit, he said, you know who I really relate it to? And we're like, who? And he said, I relate it to so-and-so. And we go, well, that's interesting. So-and-so only wrote like 10 grand last month. You know, like that's what I'm thinking in my mind. I don't know what the other guys were thinking, but that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, here he is with Paul and Andrew, but he related to so-and-so. And we said, well, what did you like about that? He goes, I just feel like I could do that. I really related to that guy, and I believe what he's saying. I believe his story. And I'm thinking, dude, what is he saying? He doesn't believe us? So then when those guys left and I'm driving him from the parking lot where we met to his house to drop him off after the meeting, he goes, man, it's hard to believe and see that big that somebody could be doing so well, but I could see myself doing what that guy's doing. So a lot of times your humble beginnings are the most attractive thing to the people around you. So if you just stick it out, what you'll find is the people that are paying attention, the people that are watching, they'll come around and want to join. But what people do is they quit too soon because they have this superficial ideal of what it looks like to really win at this, if that makes sense. And to put a caveat on that, I'll tell you something about the in-home that is very similar to that. A lot of times in the in-home, when you're challenged, like when somebody is telling you, hey, you know, I just really want to think about it. We never make a decision on the first try, and you get frustrated. That's why they're doing that. So they're wanting you to stand up for their family. They're wanting you to challenge them. They're wanting you to care. It's not just about you. It's not just about you getting your commission. They're challenging you in that regard to see how you'll respond to it. And so the correct response to it is to not get emotional. Not get emotional about what happens with you, but get emotional about their family. Like, if this was just a transactional sale, I think that's the thing that Family First Life has always done right, is this presumptiveness and assumptiveness of the close. If this was just a transactional sale to try to get you to save $4 on your life insurance, like, I wouldn't be here. I mean, these people are really interested. If they set the appointment with you and you show up at the house and they answer it and they let you in and then they don't buy it, it's weird. So any challenge that they give you, you have to look at like, they're just testing me to see if I really care. So a lot of times, if you'll just spend enough time on what it looks like if they don't do it, spend enough time during the financial inventory on why you're there. Like I heard Grayson Hughes do a training, and it changed my business from a selling standpoint, where he talked about, hey, if you can just get uncomfortable enough to be able to just talk about, you know, set a timer and talk about what it looks like if Tom doesn't come home. And ask questions around that, rather than just say, hey, why'd you fill it out, and move on really quickly. But if you can get uncomfortable with the why in the home, then you have ammunition to use when it comes time for them to see if you're willing to stand up for their family. And so some of the things that you want to try to relate to people is, listen, if this was just transactional, that would be one thing. If this was just like you call XYZ car insurance company because you want to save like $3 a month, and you change that one because you know, they have better roadside assistance and the guy helps you on the phone, that's one thing. But it's not about that. It's about your family. So I'm not the guy that's going to come here with a transactional mindset. My mindset is to put your family first. And here's what I know. You can't convince me that I'm not going to convince you that spending an extra $87 a month is going to be comfortable, but you can't convince me that your wife, Mary, is not the most important thing to you in your whole life, and that she's not worth $87 a month to make sure if anything were to happen that she'd be taken care of. So why don't we do this? Just get your driver's license. We'll put in the request for coverage. And it's appropriately challenging people. So rather than when you get those objections in the house saying like, what am I doing wrong? Why is this happening to me? How could I fix it? Say to yourself, it's not happening to me, it's happening for me. The problem isn't about me. The problem is it meant for me. It's meant for the people that are watching. And understand that your audience, the ones that are watching when you're challenged, they just want you to stand up for them. That's all this really is. And I think when you've had some death claims and you've seen what happens on the other side of it and how impactful this really is, this does truly change your life and your mindset. And the thing I want everybody to leave with as we end this, I have a friend. He's a major crimes police detective in Eastern Washington. Okay, he's been on the force for 30 years. And he has seen some of the worst things that a law enforcement officer will ever see, straight up. And I haven't talked to him in a while, but in my 20s and 30s, we spent a lot of time together. And I asked him one time, his name is Darren. I said, Darren, how do you keep doing this after you see these ferocious things? Like, what causes you to get up and want to go like solve robberies and solve rapes and solve all like you've seen terrible stuff. You know, what makes you like hold it all together and get out of bed and like go back to work the next day? And he goes, the only thing that keeps me going is I know that at the end of the day, I speak for the victim and I'm the only voice they have. It's up to me. And so the responsibility that I would put on you as you listen to this is when you're meeting with a family, you speak for their beneficiary. You speak for Mary when Tom doesn't want to do it. You speak for the kids when Mary's thinking about, I don't know if I can afford $57 a month to make sure that my family can pay for my final expenses. Like, you're speaking for the children. And I would tell people that. I would tell people, listen, I am an advocate for Tom. Tom's not here to advocate for himself, so I'm going to advocate for him. When you pass away, Mary, it's going to be the most devastating time in his life. He's not going to know what to do. He's going to be at his wit's end. And then when you couple that with a major financial stress, that's what really messes people up and why they have to go get therapy. And you can't convince me that your lack of $57 or your resourcefulness to try to come up with $57 is worth Tom having to go through the stress he's going to have to go through when this is left undone. So what we're going to do is put in a request for coverage, Mary, because we're not going to do that to Tom. Okay? So you speak for the beneficiary. You just like my buddy Darren would speak for the victim. And I hope that makes sense. So title of the call today, your past doesn't equal your future. Hopefully you guys got something out of this. Drop me a line on Facebook. Let me know if it was beneficial. I do appreciate you guys listening in. Thanks for tuning in to episode 3. And we look forward to having a new one next week. You guys have a great week. Thank you.